So my renovator Jim came to me one time and he'd met a woman who had a mother who was now in a retirement home. And she had owned a townhouse condominium forever, I think since it was new, and had since moved out of it, actually for quite some time, and hadn't done anything with it and needed to sell it. So Jim said, would you be willing to talk to the daughter about it? I said, yes, of course. And I went to look at it, and this is how it looked. Ooh. Yuck. Can you imagine walking through that? So I'm walking through that with the daughter. And, I didn't really feel like sitting down on the floor in that place and negotiating a deal. So we went to a nearby park and sat at a picnic table. And I pulled out a piece of paper and I went through what I'll show you right now. I took out a piece of paper and I wrote 3 offers on there. There's 3 things that I can do. I wrote them down. And then after I met with her, rather than taking a picture of it, which I suppose I could have done, I went home and wrote down what I said so that I would remember when they came back to me. So I said, there's 3 things I can do. I can offer you cash right now. And in that case, it would be this amount. Or number 2, the maximum amount that I can get to you is this amount. And number 3, I can actually pay you a little bit more than the cash amount if you don't mind waiting 6 months. And I will, in the 3rd case, I would have used something like an agreement for sale, and I would have paid them a little bit more because I was going to control that property from that point forward, do the renovations, put a tenant in place, and then finance it afterwards. And I'd easily be able to pay them the $140,000 out of that. So this, working backwards from that one now, number 2, the maximum that I would pay was $180,000. So that was based on $500 a month for 30 years, vendor financing, the seller financing, asking them to finance it. I was also going to ask them to subordinate a $50 first mortgage. That meant I was going to go to the bank, borrow $50,000 on this property that I figured would be worth about $215,000 when I was done. And the vendor financing would become a second mortgage behind that first mortgage. I offered them that. If the cash is not needed, or it can go towards, if $500 a month would go towards her current expenses, that would have been great. She also could have taken that note and sold it at a discount to get cash back from it. Or I could have gone back a few years later and said, you know what, I'll pay that out at a discount so that they would get cash on it. Ultimately though, backing up to number 1, they went to cash. Often cash now is what's preferable. So the way I calculated that, and I did it right in front of her, I said $215,000, here's some comparables. I came equipped. I asked my realtor to give me some comparables of what townhouses in that condo community had been selling for. And it was pretty clear that $215,000 was a fair amount. I told her I'm an investor and I need to make a profit off of it. That's why I'm talking to you. So I will offer you up to 85% of that. Please understand that part of that would have been commission if you went through a realtor. So that sounded pretty fair. And then I said, I think you'd agree that it's going to cost about $50,000 to renovate it, which was pretty reasonable having looked at it. So we came up with a price of $132,750. I then handed her the piece of paper. We quickly reviewed some of the benefits, which I scribbled at the bottom of the page for you and for me, was that no longer would her mother have to pay property taxes. There would be no more condo fees. There would be no more utilities to pay. There'd be no more liability, no commission to pay if they sold, and they wouldn't have to wait any longer. I did say I'd probably want to have some conditions on it, and notice that one of the conditions actually is financing. I say I'm paying all cash, but then I ask for a condition of financing. The reality is they are going to get all cash. It's just, I didn't know how I was going to close that deal with all cash because at this point, I didn't even have a partner yet. If they went with one of the other 2, I likely would have been able to do it by myself. But I included financing as a condition. I don't know if we actually did that when we got to the offer because I may have had a partner lined up by then. It only takes a couple days if you have lots and lots of conversations with people. So the others were I wanted to see the condo documents and I wanted to do an inspection. I asked my friend Eric if he might be interested. He was. I use a budgeting tool called Calculation of Initial Financial Contribution. You'll see it to the left of your screen. And to the right is where I calculate cash flow and estimate returns. Let's focus on the budget first. In the center column, it says due to account. That's where I estimate all of the costs and expenses that potentially might come up in this project. As they're paid, or if they're due to me, I move them to the left. If my partner is to pay them, I move them to the right, in this case, Eric. When I initially wrote this offer, I put up $1,000 of my own money as initial deposit, and then when I waived conditions, I put up another $4,000. On closing, a few weeks later, Eric put up $127,750. That amount, plus the deposits that I put up, is our purchase price. The next 4 rows are really just closing costs, and you can see that Eric has put in at this point up about $130,000. I then set to work on the project, taking care of all the renovations, looking after carrying costs, found a tenant, put the tenant in place, and as I did these things, I would update the numbers from my budgeted amounts, which I tend to highlight in yellow, and once they're done, I remove the highlighting. And I would move, if I made the payments, I'd move them over to the left. A few things that are interesting is you might see under project management, actually I call it acquisition and project management fee, which is about, well, is exactly 2% of the after repaired value, or the amount that the property is worth after we're all finished. In this case, that worked out to $4,600. That's money, that's a fee that goes directly into my pocket as part of this deal. The other amount that I point you to is a reserve fund, or reserve staying fund, which is contingencies. This is amount left over, the cash that we've left in our account after the deal is done, of just over $5,000. When this was all said and done, we went out and got a new appraisal and a lender that advanced $175,000 as a conventional first mortgage. So here's Eric's position. He's put in about $130,000. About 8 weeks later, he gets $175,000 back. It almost looks like he's to the good of $45,000 and still owns the property. But he does need to reimburse me or our account for monies that are out or that are due. And in the end, at the bottom, in green, it shows that Eric's total contribution to this deal was $5,141.48. That's pretty good, but Eric made it even better because that initial amount, he borrowed that from his father at about a percentage point higher than some conservative investment that his father had it in. So Eric really was out of pocket only about $5,000 on this deal. Let's look at what those returns look like when you get a property like that with that little amount of money. So bottom right-hand corner of cash flow and estimate of return shows the purchase price of $132,750. The estimate of value at the outset was $230,000. Above that mortgage data is where we figure out what kind of mortgage we expect to be able to put on that, at what rate and terms, and the payment. We also find out there what our first year principal reduction will be. Over to the left is where we have cash flow, so rent of $1,550 minus principal and interest, that's the mortgage payment, property taxes, condo fee because this was a condo, and an allowance for property management. That left cash flow monthly of $117. That's a little less than I'd like to see, but bear in mind that we've got $5,000 in a reserve or a staying fund cash. We have a fully renovated property and a good tenant in place. Plus, we have opportunity to raise rents in subsequent years. Now, what's the return? With an initial financial contribution of just $5,141.48, here are the expected first-year returns. $1,400 in cash flow, positive cash flow, principal reduction of $3,774. I estimated at the time an appreciation of about 3%, which would be $6,900, and value created is the difference between the price we paid, the amounts we paid to renovate it, and what the bank told us it was worth when we had it evaluated before placing the new first mortgage. That results by taking the almost $60,000 in that first year return divided by an initial contribution of just $5,141 results in a return of over 1,000%. Now, Eric only owns 50% of it because I get the other 50%, but a return of 582% in 1 year is pretty darn good. Now, let me ask you a question. If Eric has put in $5,000 and I've put in 0 but still have 50%, what is my return? And to make it even sweeter, remember that I had $4,600 in my acquisition project management fee. So I've actually got $4,600 cash in my pocket and 50% of the upside of this deal. The answer to my question is my return is infinite. That's the beauty of working with projects like this and partners like this. Now, let's take a look at what this project looked like after we were done. Quite the improvement.